Hello everybody and welcome back to LRN, where today we are delving back into the cost cap saga that of course took up so much time and energy and thought process for us as F1 fans over the last few months, of course ending with what we know was the punishment for Red Bull. It was a punishment which many people can't agree on whether it was enough, whether it was too much. Certainly, of course, we know Red Bull thought it was too much. A lot of us fans, I feel, unless you were Red Bull fans, felt that maybe it wasn't enough. People from outside F1, we've had as an example, Craig Scarborough, a renowned technical journalist who does report on the technical aspects of Formula One and other motorsports. He felt that it would truly impact Red Bull for years to come. Just this punishment, which wasn't really deemed huge, will genuinely hinder them for years. Whereas we've had people like racing director Lauren Mekies in the last month come out and say, or I'll quote him here, "More crucially, regardless of what numbers you come up with for the 10% reduction in aerodynamic testing, the truth of the matter is that because it's not combined with any budget cap reductions, they will be completely free to spend that money elsewhere, whether it be weight reductions or suspension development." So he's got the view that yes, it will impact them in terms of wind tunnel testing, but because the money hasn't reduced, they can just invest that elsewhere, and what they lose from wind tunnel aerodynamic testing, they will gain in other aspects of development that will help make up the time, the lap time they're going to lose due to the reduction in aerodynamic testing in the wind tunnel. And that may be the case. I mean, personally, I'd be very, very surprised if Red Bull were not still there or thereabouts over the next couple of years. I really don't see that this punishment's enough to knock them off their perch, or at least knock them way down the order for sure. But we'll only see the way that the next couple of seasons play out. But what we're going to do, we've had fresh comments from Mohammed Ben Suleyman around the F1 cost cap, around the review that is going into the F1 cost cap, what that means for the cost cap moving forward. We're going to dissect his comments, talk about what it means, and then we're also going to get into some comments made by Zach Brown, which I think are really interesting, and I do really agree with him. So we're going to get into those. It's about how the sport should change moving forward now that these the cost cap regulations are in place. So we're going to get into that as well. But we're going to kick off with the comments made by Ben Suleyman around the FIA president, around what is happening around the cost cap, obviously with the findings, what's happened following the investigation they went to, because of course it was the first year that those cost caps were implemented. Everyone from his point of view was new, it was a fresh process, and what they've learned and what's going to change moving forward. So we'll get straight into it. If you are new around here though, please make sure to subscribe on the bottom right hand side. We cover all the latest F1 news and offer genuine fan opinions, so make sure to get involved in the comments below as well. So we'll kick off then with his comments. So he said, "We learned a lot, and a big review is going into it." That was when he was asked if he felt the cost cap punishment was given out as enough of a deterrent. So they are reviewing that, and whether or not, from their learnings, whether in the future, I guess, a larger punishment or smaller punishment would be required based on the findings of what happened this season. Who knows in the first year what is going to be the outcome? We didn't even expect it. That sounds a bit naive there. Didn't even expect it. I guess they just assumed everyone was going to fall within the cost cap and they wouldn't have to go through these issues in the first season. Probably because, of course, everyone had a chance to practice it the year before and go through a test run. And I assume everyone came out of that fully understanding the process. So he probably came away thinking everyone knows what they're doing. It's not really going to be a problem. Not going to worry about it. So maybe that's why they didn't have a really in-depth structure to what they were going to do if someone did breach the cost cap, because they were just naively thinking that no one would. It's possible. We'll move on. If you look at the other teams, they will say we have been light on them, and as in Red Bull, and the penalty. Some of them want them to be hanged and they want to see blood, and the guilty teams themselves see it as huge on them. So where do you draw that? And I'll comment there on, obviously the teams found guilty are going to think whatever punishment given to them is huge, because they want to ensure, one, if they make a big fuss about how big it is, it'll keep, hopefully for them, the punishment lower, and secondly, It will give that opposite argument to teams that they know are going to be pushing for a larger punishment on them. And again, in the future, if they were to break the break the cost cap again, they would again want to be not punished too much to ensure they didn't have a massive issue in the future. So it's to their benefit to say that they weren't punished too much. But of course, adversely to that, if you're looking at the teams that haven't broken the cost cap, it's to their benefit to push as hard as possible to say that punishment's too small, that punishment needs to be bigger, that needs to be harder, because it benefits them. Because if a team like Red Bull is massively punished because of breach of cost cap, of course it's going to benefit Ferrari, Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, every other team on the grid is going to benefit from that if their aim is to catch and compete and therefore beat Red Bull Racing and any other team. Let's say Alpine were found guilty of the cost cap. I guarantee McLaren would be pushing hard, saying the cost cap needs to be worse. And to be fair, Zak Brown was coming that. We read the letter from Zak Brown. He was adamant that cheating had happened and the cost cap punishments should be huge, in line with what had been said around the world of F1 previously. So we know what Zak Brown's thoughts were anyway, but my point is, if a team close to you, one you're competing with, is to break the rules, you are going to be there pushing for a punishment, a huge punishment, whereas the team who has actually broken the rules is going to be there saying, look, it wasn't that bad, this is what we did, let's make sure it's fair, let's keep it to a minimum, we didn't do that much. You expect those conversations to take place. So it kind of doesn't matter what the teams directly impacted, whether it's for them or against them, say. It's really more up to the FIA to make genuine informed decisions, not to be affected by the noise coming at them from the teams, because it's so incredibly biased, the noise that's coming up from the teams, whether it be for or against larger punishments. So they need to make informed decisions based on what they think is fair judgments, and then we as the fans can, and of course the teams as well, can react how we choose, whether that be we think that they have not gone far enough or they've gone too far. Whichever side of the fence you fall on, the FIA should be making informed, good decisions based on the data and any information that they have to ensure that the punishment fits the crime. That's their job. And the same that we had with Michael Massey getting too much noise in his ear from teams like Red Bull through the 2021 season, where they've now cut that off because they felt he was being influenced by the noise from the teams, and it was hard for him to cut that out. I think it's the same here. I think you can't go into this investigation listening to what those teams think, because they are biased in their views. But we'll move on. I mean, we have to be fair also. Do we want to get rid of them, the punishments, or we want them to be straightened up and not to do it? Now again, obviously that's a key question. You don't want to get rid of them, clearly. You don't want the teams to leave F1, and I know that teams like Red Bull in the past have threatened to leave. I think Ferrari have threatened to leave in the past due to certain regulation changes and things like that. So yes, you want to make sure the teams don't leave. You don't want to reach a point where you're basically making it pointless for them to compete, because as F1 fans, that's not really what we want. We just don't want to see them get an unfair advantage by cheating the rules, and then the punishment to be too small so it doesn't bring them back in line with the gain that they made by breaking the rules in the first place. That's my view. Again, let me know yours in the comments below. But certainly we do want the punishment, as I say, to be enough to straighten them up, to prevent other teams and the teams that have broken the cost cap this time to think, you know what, the punishment's not that bad, let's go ahead and break it again moving forward. And of course, we've had Red Bull, or Christian Horner, come out and say he expects 6 teams to break the cost cap next season. So that's going to be interesting. Let's see if he turns out to be right and what those punishments will be based on the review that we're seeing taking place at the moment. The only thing I would say is that what we did in September, October, it should be done early. But as the first year, we learned a lot from it, and we're still learning. So it is better to come in May, not in October. So that, for me, really key comment. We definitely need to see the results of the cost cap coming in earlier in the season. Because, for example, if you have Red Bull, again, let's say Red Bull break the cost cap again, and they're found guilty again in what will be May this time, it's early enough that you can put punishments in place for disqualifying them from races, removing points from their gained drivers or constructors championship points in the season they're currently in, not just from the season before. So it can be proper sporting punishments that actually have an impact on the season that we're in, because no one wants to have historical stuff, right? We want to see it happen there and then in the moment, and how it impacts them, and then how they recover. And I think it could add an element of jeopardy to the season that we're in, and add a bit of enjoyment as the fan. When you're doing it all, from previous seasons, it's all happening behind closed doors, and it doesn't feel the same. You don't get any enjoyment out of it. So let's at least have punishments impact the season that we're in, and then add a sporting element, a bit of jeopardy that makes it at least a bit more exciting for us, the fans, to see how that plays out on the F1 grid. And it might prevent them bringing upgrades later on in the season. It could prevent further technical improvements. As I say, it could be a points penalty, depending of course on how severe the breach is for any team involved. But certainly I would like to see the punishments happen in the moment, in the season, so that teams truly feel that punishment, and we then see how that punishment plays out that season. We see it happen in front of us. It isn't this, oh, should we give them this, should we give them that? I think, where you would perhaps do that punishment there and then, you wouldn't have that process in the mind of the person deciding the punishment to go, oh, but if we do this, it's going to strip them of the championship. Do we really want the championship to be decided that way? If you do it early on in the season, halfway through the season, then whatever happens at the end of the season, it doesn't have that layer of something going wrong, something that's perhaps not been done in the right way. It doesn't feel right morally. It doesn't feel right to strip someone of a championship they've already earned. I don't agree with that. I think it should have happened. But anyway, it just gives that freedom to the FIA when they're deciding the punishments, to administer them without the thinking process of, oh no, if we do that, even though I think that they're probably due that points punishment, it would then strip them of the title, and is the punishment that is what they've done truly enough to strip them of it, etc., etc. We want that removed from the conversation, and if you do the punishments there and then, you have that problem gone, because they'll be able to do it in May. And they go on to say, the financial regulation has been the first year. Policing it is very hard, and that is why we have discussed also employees. 3 more on the financial side, 3 more on the chassis and the power unit, so more recruitment is coming ahead. So they're going to go ahead and employ more people into the teams doing the investigations to ensure they're staying on top of it. They know exactly what's going on. They can administer penalties more accurately, because they have a better understanding of what the teams have been doing throughout the season, and throughout that cost cap period. So that's really good. I think that's a good move. More heads can only be a good thing, and only more eyes on the prize, and then hopefully we'll be more informed, because the reports will be more informed, and we'll have a better understanding of not only why they've gone over, what they've done, where they've maybe tried to cut corners, and what might happen in the future. More heads is good. It's a positive move by the FIA to hire more people in to support their investigations. If you don't have the manpower and the proper people to police it, what's the use of having this regulation? I believe there is a balance between finance and also the sporting penalties there. Yes, also true, there is a balance of finance and sporting penalties. Again, the question doesn't necessarily, we kind of knew that already, and I think they applied that to the previous punishment. The issue and the question's always, is it enough? Whether that be sporting or financial, have they gone far enough? Have they gone too far? And that's a bit that the FIA need to work out. Are they going to base it purely on money? Are they going to base it on where that cost cap was spent, on where the money was spent, on where the perceived benefit of upgrades came, benefit of performance was? Can they get enough detail, maybe with these extra heads, to truly understand maybe where the time's been gained through the season, where they gained tenths of a second, what that total benefit was through the rest of the season? How much detail can they get that will truly help them work out what the punishment needs to be, and maybe where they would have finished in races had they not had that benefit? And it may not happen again. It may be that teams moving forward do stay within the cost cap. Of course, we heard Toto Wolff come out and say that essentially we will not be breaking the cost cap, because we do not want the PR disaster that Red Bull are going through at the moment, essentially becoming villains of the sport because of the mess that they're in, because of the cost cap. Even though from, of course, Red Bull's eyes, they didn't do anything that bad, the way it was reported in the media, the way it was reported by the other teams, the way it was reported by some of us fans, it did vilify a lot of what Red Bull were doing. And Mercedes essentially saying, you know what, we don't want any part of that. We are staying well clear, and we'll see, of course, in the future if that turns out to be true. But they were comments made by Toto Wolff. But that's essentially an update on the review they're doing into the cost cap, and I think that's all really positive. as with all these things in F1, we need to see what the outcome is. We need to see what the end game is. Will they learn from their mistakes? Will they have the power to really implement the punishments they're threatening when a team does break the rules? And that's all we want to see. I don't care who the team is that breaks the cost cap in the future, but the rules need to be applied. And if we can get more people in positions to do the investigations more thoroughly and apply a better form of punishment that we can feel like truly matches the crime, then I think that's better for everybody. And again, if they can apply it there and then and apply sporting sanctions there and then, whether it be development, whether it be point sanctions, whatever it is, depending on the breach, doing it in May, not October, will be a massive help for everybody involved in the sport. So let's make sure that that definitely happens and keep an eye and see if they keep to their word. When we get to May next season, will we get the result of the cost cap? Because remember, we did have an announcement that a breach had occurred, and it took forever for us to find out what the punishment would be and how much they'd actually breached it by. So we had weeks of speculation, news coming out everywhere. The FIA needs to get on top of that and make sure they are releasing the information quicker, the investigations are happening quicker, to prevent that excessive speculation that occurred. And that's on the FIA to do. And as we go through it, we'll be here. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, because when that does happen in May, and of course we'll be covering everything in between, we'll be there to review what's going on, whether again those punishments are correct, and what's happening in the sport. So make sure you're subscribed for that. Finally then, we're just going to go quickly into some comments by Zach Brown, who's made some comments on the cost cap and the technical regulations. So he said, if you've got a cost cap, then there should actually be some more technical freedom within the cost cap. If you would then see more innovations and risk taking, and the cars would look even more different. If you have the cap, then you've kind of got two guidelines, as everything has to look exactly like that, and you can't spend more than that. Just stop with the spend and do what you want. I think you would bring out more innovation, and everyone would learn from each other. It was like when Braun did the double diffuser in 2009. They got a great head start, but by the end of the year, it was balanced out. So I think you could get that. That's the fascinating part of the sport. And I remember that season. I remember Red Bull coming back at Braun. Braun didn't really win a race in the last few seasons. Red Bull were dominant, but obviously they got such a head start at the beginning of the year that Braun saw it out and won the championship famously. Now, there's elements to this I agree with and disagree with. Now, what I don't want to happen is to lose this ground effect process we're going through at the moment. I think it's really, really key for the sport that we keep it. I think that it's beneficial. I want to see the cars getting closer together. I want to see that closer racing and that element to the ground effect cars that does allow them to get closer and drive in that dirty air of the car in front, because, of course, it tries to pass the air around the cars behind, therefore preventing massively the impact of the car behind by the dirty air from the car in front. I think that's all positive. I don't want to lose it, but there's got to be areas where, given, of course, what he's saying is you've got a cost cap limit, so you can't have a team like Mercedes go, we've got completely technical freedom, we can just go and design anything under the sun, and we can put it on our car. They could do that without the cost cap. Of course, everyone now has the same cost cap limit, so why not allow some technical basically differences between the cars, allow a bit more variation so that we can see some innovations and potentially see just exciting cars on the track. Now, I do want to see that. I want to see technical innovation. F1's famous for technical innovation through the years, through the decades. You know, some of the best cars, some of the cars we herald through the legacy and the history of Formula One have been the ones that came out of the blue with something new, something never seen before, and thrived for sometimes years, you know, especially in the history of the sport. Do we really want to remove that completely? No. I do want to see technical innovation. I want to see enough wiggle room in the regulations that teams can truly innovate and do something interesting, but I just don't want it to be at the expense of good racing. And it's really difficult, and I really do feel for the people within F1 when they're trying to work out what these regulations are going to be, whether on how they toe that balance between allowing for technical innovation but also ensuring the cars are close enough together that they can overtake, not overpowering the DRS zones, and working that all out is really difficult. And we go through season to season. So like this year, for instance, we saw a lot of the time the DRS could be too powerful, and it was track to track, but that's something they will learn. So at certain tracks, I would expect the DRS to be reduced, maybe sometimes increased, maybe the number of DRS zones increased or reduced, depending on tracks and how they performed individually. and we'll see how that plays out. But as an element to Zach Brown's comments, I do agree. I want to see that technical innovation. I just be really, really careful not to allow that innovation to therefore prevent close racing happening in Formula One, and then you sort of just have to police it a bit to ensure that we don't start to see that field spread that we've had in the past. Of course, we've just had the most dominant season ever by Max Verstappen and Red Bull, so it hasn't worked perfectly, but I certainly think the midfield fights have been brilliant. Certainly seen a lot more closer fighting, and certain races this year were absolutely phenomenal, and I definitely don't want to lose that moving forward. So we'll see what they come up with, but I would like to see some more clear, obvious design differences. I think you look at the Ferrari and their side pod designs versus that of maybe like the Mercedes with the really tight design, and of course Red Bulls with the massive cut-ins. I like that. I love those differences. I love the fact they're so different, and yet they've ended up on track fighting so closely together despite the massive differences in side pod design. I just want to see more of that, more, innovative thinking from each individual team and ability within the regulations to implement those designs, but at the same time keep them close together, have that good fighting. That's my view anyway. Let me know yours in the comments below. Let me know what your thoughts on the cost cap are. Are you happy that the results are going to come further into the not as far into the season? They're going to be releasing them in May. Do you think that's going to make positive change? Do you think there's positive comments being made by the FIA president? Let me know in the comments below. And do you agree with Zach Brown's comments? Do you feel that there should be more technical maneuverability within the regulations for the teams now that the cost cap is in place? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'm just going to thank you so much for watching. Do make sure to subscribe if you are new to the channel. Hit a like on the video if you did enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.